Tak já bych zahájil poslední dnešní prezentaci, která se bude zabývat zpracování hrubých materiálů, katalogizací, archivací a zpětným používáním těch materiálů. Chtěl bych tady přivítat Christiana z Editshare.
Hello.
Což je sales manager, a pre-sales manager, který se stará vlastně o EMEA a DACH trh, to znamená směrem od Německa na východ a okolní německy mluvící země, kde se stará o instalaci, o tu obchodní komunikaci. Je to i pro nás jakoby nová firma, kterou jsme teďka dávali do několika instalací. Máme vlastně první nějaký prodej a první zkušenosti, co se týče použití Editshareu. Co se týče jakýchkoliv otázek, protože si myslím, že a pár vás tady vidím tady dokonce jednoho budoucího uživatele, Pavla Hrudu ze Zlína, který už si to zařízení vlastně koupil, ale ještě nemá nainstalovaný, protože není dokončené celé studio, ale tak ten aspoň uvidí, co ho čeká teďka. A máme ještě nějaký další klienty, kteří samozřejmě o tohleto mají zájem. Tak jsem chtěl říct, že mám tady kolegu Dušana Bajtoše, který je vlastně naším specialistou vyškoleným na Editshare. Tak kdybyste vlastně měli té prezentaci měli jakoukoliv otázku k tomu, co tady ten kolega bude předvádět, klidně zvedněte ruku, zeptejte se, klidně i česky, on to kolega když tak přeloží, nebo můžete přímo anglicky. Myslím, že to bude opravdu zajímavý a je jasný, že celé toto řešení, který spěje k tomu, že to, co se pracně vyrobí a natočí a někde uloží, tak pokud jako se s tím nepracuje systematicky a nějakými standardními procesy, tak samozřejmě se ztratí a už se nikdy nepoužije a veškerá vaše energie, co jste do toho vrazili, do toho pořízení, se někde vypaří. Tak já už to nebudu protahovat, předám teda slovo Christianovi, který vám představí firmu Editshare a jejich řešení.
Great, thanks Peter. Thanks for the great summary. I much appreciate. Almost most of it is already said. I also want to introduce my wingman here in the system integration company in Disk, Dušan. He's going to assist me. If you have any questions, Czech language, unrelated, whatever, you can throw them at us in Czech language. Dušan is going to help. If I say something that is not clear, please interrupt me. Okay, so I see we're a little bit behind time, so I will try to keep the PowerPoint slides a little bit faster. And okay, good. Whatever. Yes, whatever. I don't want to miss the chance to also let you have a look at the application, because what we are doing is slightly different from what you have seen today. Actually, we are really at the heart of video production with our system. As I heard, Peter already explained, it's about production workflows and about archiving. And it solves a couple of typical problems. May I ask into the audience, is there anyone in the audience that has ever come back from a photo or video shoot, wanted to play his materials on the disk and the disk was full? No video shooters here. Yeah, there's a lady. Okay, well, that's a typical problem. You come back from a shoot, you have tons of material, you try to shovel it onto your local PC, disk is full, you can't work. Same problem occurs very often in production, and that's why actually using bigger storage systems has become very popular. Same applies to different codecs, by the way. If you have ever come back from vacation, your cell phone, your DSLR camera, your GoPro, you have made codecs from different devices. Try to get them on an editing timeline to make a video out of it. It's almost impossible. You need to transfer and transcode. So there is a lot of problems really that are typical to the video workflow that we can solve with our system actually. And the whole idea, actually that was what our founder thought, is to simplify storytelling. The whole video editing part, the whole video editing step in the production is all about storytelling. You're putting pictures together in the right fashion, in the right order to tell a nice story. And our founder, Andy Liebman, this guy here, he was actually filming for Discovery Channel documentation Mission to Mars, and they were in the Canadian Arctic to shoot, deserted landscapes and stuff like this, where they were staying 1 week in tents. actually shooting during the day, only a couple of hours, good light, shooting during the day, and then in the night hours, they had to double check the material. Did we get the right impressions? Did we get the right light? Does it look nice? And they always had to shovel discs from tent to tent with the materials. And that's when he thought, this cannot be the right fashion to work. Actually, it cannot be the case that it's necessary to carry a disc from one machine to another to really get to a co-working result. We have to find a new solution. And then they started inventing Editshare. That's the name of the company. So we edit the material and we share the material between editing operators, between different editing machines. And that's a very decisive and important fact for the video workflow. So, generally speaking, our mission is to develop and build video-related systems that are, giving the editors a huge shared storage device that they can use from all different angles, from all different facilities, with all different editing workstations, and then create workflow solutions that help them share media amongst the different workflow steps. So, for instance, do a transcoding, do a review and approval workflow, do additional things that are required to finally get to a finished result. The customers that we are working with are mainly in the TV and broadcast area. We're doing a lot with international broadcasters, just to mention a few, NDR and BR in German ARD Group, as well as ZDF. They're equipping their outside studios with this system, where they have medium-sized production teams, 20, 30 people, that need a shared storage solution to create materials with a very quick time to air. It's mostly news production, so for them it's very important to work quick and efficient. But also companies like NHK, Japan State Broadcaster, ABC Group is very interesting. That's Australian Broadcast Corporation. They're amongst our biggest customers. They have 2,500 editors working on an Editshare system to share material and to share workflows. Well, then we do a lot of projects in the post-production and production area, especially where companies like Endemol in the Banijay Group are doing reality TV shows. You know, that's a really typical workflow. So you're getting tons of material, plenty of cameras. You want to know what's in this material before you even touch it. Otherwise, you will never have chance to really find the shot that you are looking for. And they are using it to really gain the benefit out of media asset management, out of enriching the data with the video footage with metadata, so that they can search more easily, share more easily, and get to a finished result within hours. That's what they actually need in the reality TV realm. We have a lot of companies in the corporate environment. Well-known fact, corporate companies nowadays produce their marketing materials, in-house training materials. So whenever a corporate looks for a video production system, most of the time they start with local workstations, then they drown in materials. They have hard disks sitting everywhere in the cabinet, in the drawer, on the window board. And at that point they start rethinking, so how can we get use out of this material? How can we remonetize what we have produced not only last week but also last year? We need to make it searchable, and we need to make it possible to find this material back. So corporate is a big market. Education, we have a couple. I also have a list with other universities. I want to mention Kunstuniversität Linz, that's right here. Big university in Austria, fine arts. Most of the universities that I'm working with are actually doing educational work in media development, media design. So very often this is media design students working on these systems. So very often they don't use it not necessarily for their internal production, but also for students to learn the video production workflow. New media is very, very obvious. I mentioned Snapchat before. This is a typical customer of ours. Also within these customers, they are doing a lot of production. So the market is really changing. Then we do a lot of sports production. FIFA is currently producing in Qatar with our system. Once again, It's about creating highlight shots, getting materials very quickly annotated and make it searchable, and do highlight shots in the middle of a football match or things like this. So FIFA, also UEFA for the European Championships, but we have a lot of sports clubs like FC Bayern, UEFA, Chelsea, and a couple of others. And that's a typical market in the USA, house of worship. It's these small church TV stations, not very common in Europe, but in America it's a big market. And then a couple of academic clients, mostly in UK. We have our headquarter actually in UK. Our founder works in UK, and we still do most of the operations from there. I just checked, University of Sheffield is not in there, but maybe we should get them on board very soon. I will definitely give it a try. So plenty of university. These are mainly UK examples, but in the slide before I showed you a couple of those in Germany. We have plenty of those. And then, what are the typical questions that universities are asking for? You certainly know it better than me, but I want to point out a few. In most of the cases when they are doing video education, they talk to students that are coming, they have learned the business at home, doing YouTube videos or whatever. They work with all different sorts of nonlinear editing, video editing systems. So the students, they expect to be able to work on a system like this with all capable and all available editing system. That's one of the most important requirements for a system like this. Then central ingest. We want to know how we get materials into this system, how we get it registered in the media asset management. There must be a central ingest room where you can go with your camera cards when you're coming from a shoot and just get your material registered into the system. It's very important not to have only live ingest, but also central ingest rooms for your materials. Very often they require the system must be widely used in film and television production, because when people are coming out of education, they want to apply for a job, so necessarily they need to have experience with a system that is common in the production industry. So security is a very important issue. Most of the cases, there is an existing Active Directory AD sort of a authentication installation already. So modern systems need to comply with this right away and integrate on existing security measures, so that the video specialists don't have to argue very long with the IT guys about security and all that stuff. I assume you know that problem. Automated QC workflows is very often the case. We are especially from unexperienced camera people, we are getting materials that are too bright in light or too dark, and they need to be quality controlled. Are they good enough for broadcast production? So what we can do here is, once we ingest materials into the system, we can run them through a quality control right away, and then at least in the metadata receive a feedback about if the quality of this material was sufficient for broadcast production or not. So these things that can be easily automated. Simple auditing functionality to locate student media is very often an interesting factor. Students are not really disciplined when it comes to where do I store my stuff and whom do I get access to this. So there must be a certain level of auditing functionality which is embedded into our system, also for the video production, and in the corporate case we need this very often. So the system records every touch of a file, every move, every access to a file in a reporting database, and can be asked to show reporting data at any time. So many of the typical problems that we can solve. One more that I want to mention is 24/7 access. I mean, when I was a student, I was a programmer. I was always doing my work at night, and I assume many students do the same nowadays. So with a system like this, you have all your materials in a central place, central storage solution, but you can log in via remote access and work from home, at least to do annotation of your material, rough cut, shot selection, whatever. All the editorial workflow can be done completely at home. You can even edit completely at home with so-called proxy files, and then send the job back to the central storage system to get rendered. So the system is really destined to be used 24/7 from people working outside. And what does it look like? Actually, we are pretty much a twofold technology. The first one I need to mention is EFS, the Editshare file system. So we developed our own file system that is really optimized to handle streaming video data. Most of the file systems that you get within the typical operating systems are just not capable of doing this. They might be good enough to support one workstation with the required bandwidth to handle streaming video, but when 2, 3, 10 workstations are working on that storage, and then maybe using a couple of streams simultaneous, picture-in-picture, whatever kind of effect they want to make, regular file systems are just not capable. They just don't give you the bandwidth that you need to support so many concurrent streams. So what we have actually done, we developed our own file system layer that can be run either standalone on a piece of hardware. It's a software that runs on a piece of hardware, specific file system, but we also have an entity that runs in the cloud. That is very important. We are certified partner at AWS, so our whole infrastructure, our whole software system runs in AWS to give you the opportunity to use an AWS installation as a second facility. So some of the producers, they are having a facility in Munich and one in London and exchanging materials back and forth to share projects. We can do the same with projects in the cloud that are actually capable to be shared between any location on the planet. Very important nowadays, cloud production really gets popular. So this is the file system layer, and above that we have Flow. That's our media asset management. Media asset management is what I explained before, helps you to catalog your material and make it searchable by so-called metadata. So I will show you in a practical use, but if you give contextual metadata to your material, it's much easier to find it back. You don't find it back easily by the serial number of a camera because you don't remind which camera you were using at the shoot. But you remind, this was for customer X and Y, it was in the year 2019, and it was in Lugano, whatever. You just search in these search phrases and you find back your material because they are embedded in the metadata. So this is pretty much the idea of media asset management. Media asset management enables you to enrich your data with your material with metadata, and then make it searchable and available for all sorts of third-party applications. Most of the case, this is an editing system, but it can also be a transcoder, it can be a quality check system, whatever. Very, very many options. So this is pretty much the architectural thing. And then once you start engaging into the media asset management, you get a couple of modules that you will also see on my computer later. So pretty much control interface for the administrators. We have Airflow, which is the remote editing system that can be used from the outside to do shot selections and rough cuts. We have our Flow story system. That's pretty much our own 3D nonlinear editor, something comparable to Adobe Premiere. This one, by the way, was previously sold under the name Lightworks. It was a very famous editor in the late 90s and early 2000s. Pulp Fictions, for instance, has been edited on that. And we have Flow Automation. This is to automate your workflows. As you can see here, it's a little bit tree-based editing system, so you can prepare a folder to just wait for something to happen. We call it watch folder. Then if someone throws a piece of material into this folder, you can create a workflow that says, look at this material. Is it 25 frames per second? Is it 50 frames per second? Is it HD? Is it UHD? And then, depending on the result of the first research upon the material, you can trigger different workflows so that an HD material is treated differently than a UHD, or 25 frames treated differently than a 50 frames. So this really allows you to create a fully automated workflow to suit your standard operations that you do every day. I always tell customers, if you do something manual for 3 times, don't do it again. Write an automation. Maybe first time it takes you a bit more time, but after that you save a lot. And this is what it looks like. Actually, don't want to go too much into detail. We have our nice orange boxes. Starts in the entry level with an EFS 200, 12 disks inside, so 12 disks sharing bandwidth, actually creating, let's say, mediocre bandwidth for video streaming content. We're starting with 48 terabytes here. You see it's a bit bigger than what you buy in terms of disks for your regular PCs because you want to share it amongst several people. Then what we sell most of the time is EFS 300. That one has 16 disks inside and supports the automation. So the automation license comes within. So that's mostly the reason why the people are going for the bigger system. We recommend this because it has a bit bigger bandwidth. And as we know, once you start working on a system like this, the next question that you have will be, maybe in half a year time, how can I get more bandwidth? And we have solved that problem already in the architectural design of the software, because one of these boxes shares 16 disks. So it's 16 disks giving you data at a time simultaneously. What happens if you put the next box next to it? Most of the standard NAS systems that you find in the market, they are just adding capacity because they are not interconnected amongst each others. This system, once you add a new node, rebalances the whole material so that in the future not 16 disks are supporting your workflow, but 32. So by doubling the bandwidth, by doubling the capacity, you're not only putting more terabytes into the system, but also more bandwidth per second, which helps you increase the amount of editors, enlarge your codec, go UHD, go whatever you want, and create more data and handle it sufficiently. So this is EFS 300. Then we have EFS 450. It's the same build like EFS 300, but it's more for enterprise applications. You know, with this system, we handle the metadata controller that controls where are the files in the blocks of the data of the file system. In this case, we hold the metadata controller separately, and this gives you the chance to build high availability systems so that when your storage block breaks down, a second storage block is already there waiting to take over the work. So in a very demanding environment, TV production, news production in the TV environment, they need necessarily HA, because they cannot afford to have a downtime of 30 minutes in the morning time when they're producing the morning news. Impossible. So with this enterprise-grade system, we are building the huge 100+ users systems in the broadcast field. Usually, for an academic, I would not recommend this. If not, you are having hundreds of students in the video editing field that are relying on this system day by day and night by night. So this is pretty much the architecture, different choices that you have to equip your system. We have a couple of side systems, one box for SSD if you do single frame, color retouching, color grading. It's very heavy material. Every frame is one single file. So in this case, you need more bandwidth. That's why we are putting an SSD option here. We have a nearline option, very important. If you look for a storage system, everybody is telling you you need more primary storage, primary storage. The primary storage, what I just described before, is the most expensive storage you can buy. And once it's full, everybody's trying to sell you another primary storage. But that doesn't make much sense, because you will fill the second one as well, and half a year later, you will ask for the third. It's not the way to go. The way to go is to free your primary storage from legacy projects that you are not working on. So if a project was not touched, and you can do this with an automated workflow, if a project is not touched for, let's say, 3 months, you can shovel it away to a cheaper storage. And this is, in our case, the nearline box. We have them up to 1 petabyte storage. That's cheap, reliable storage that supports your workflow and keeps your production storage free for the next production. So that's 40 NL and 60 NL. And then behind that, we also have an archiving system. That's a LTO tape library, you know, data tapes. If your material is sitting on the nearline and you have not touched it for another year, you don't want it there. You put it to a tape, and in the tape library it can rest forever. But once someone comes back and wants this project, it's getting retrieved back from the tape, first to the nearline, then to the primary, depending on the requirement that you choose, and you can continue working on it or use the raw materials or whatever. This gives you freedom of scalability into the many petabyte range with the very cheapest technology you can find. You know, an LTO tape sits in the tape library. It takes no power. It's not heating. You don't need cooling for that. It's cheap. A 12 terabyte cassette costs you like 80 euros, something in that range. It's much cheaper than disk. You don't need to have it in the data center with a cooling system. It's not consuming power. So data that you are keeping for long, put them on an LTO drive. That's my recommendation. And then the typical users, yeah, I explained it already. A small system, 5 to 10 users. Bigger system, 10, 20, max, we say 14, but you can ramp it up to 20. Then if you want high resolution, high bandwidth workflows, single frame grading, whatever, you want to add an SSD storage, but you can run them in the same file system. So the SSD storage doesn't show up as a separate storage item. It's just another storage target for the admin routine, where you can say my project is now not sitting on the primary, it's sitting on the SSD storage. Or then if you have finished working on it, just change the storage goal for that, and it's going back to another storage. But still, you always see it in the same file system. It's not going to move from what you see on your PC. Behind this, as I said, the big installations with EFS 450, and then, yeah, you want to add a nearline or an archive if you have enough data that justifies this step. So it's a very modular system that grows very easily, and it's completely open to third-party applications. We integrate with pretty much every software that is in the industry, from transcoders through quality checkers, compositing, editing systems, whatever you have in the market, most of the systems, because we are really one of the common solutions here, most of the systems have full integration with the Editshare platform. So then, in a production workflow, typically, as I said before, you have an ingest room, you have a storage facility that is used by many users, you have your asset management that makes your material searchable. Once it's searchable, even editors that are not having access to a real video editing system, they can search through, select some subclips, I will show you in a minute, select some subclips, create a little sequence, and then hand it over to the editing, where the specialists are doing only the final retouch, putting graphics onto it and making it look premium. So pretty much this is the editorial workflow behind, and then you can package and deliver it to whatever platform you want. Also, this can be done in an automated workflow. And you know, for a bigger installation, university that trains a couple of 100 or 1,000 students for media design or whatever, for sure you would run it bigger. Maybe you want a dedicated ingest solution. I've seen so many cameras around here. We have our own ingest solution where you actually can ingest directly live from camera, studio ingest. But we would also support an ingest that is done via NDI with new tech application or any other application. So we pretty much integrate, as I said, with almost everything here. But generally speaking, you want an ingest server if you have studio cameras. Otherwise, you want your basic workstations connected to a central storage. Then your editing systems, maybe optionally with some SSD storage to really support any high bandwidth workflows. And then behind this, you want 24/7 remote working, mostly out of the cloud. We've done it above here. Actually, the full system is, as I said, supported to run in the cloud. So, yeah, most of it, I said it already. Typical workflows, centralized ingest, agnostic to platform, client software. I forgot to mention, no matter if you use Windows, Linux workstations, Macs, whatever you use, all is fully supported. So, automated workflows, yeah, we just show a couple of workflows that can be done with the automation tool. I don't want to go too much into detail here. As I said before, most of the workflows, once you do them 2 or 3 times by hand, you want to get them automated. So, typical workflow would be QC and delivery. So once you have a piece of material finished, you want to pipe it through a QC system, get an approval from your head editor, and only then send it off to your distribution channel, whatever that might be. So most of these things, actually, we are automating them via a flow automation system. And then, yeah, the journey to the cloud. I've heard already that many of your productions are going directly to the cloud. This is a good way to go. Actually, your material is pretty safe there, much safer than most of the systems that you have on premise. But if you really want to go into more advanced production, you don't want to save finished products into a cloud drive. You rather want clean feeds, like that's what we call it in the broadcast world. You rather want clean feeds of the camera streams recorded, and then, as we have seen in the Kaltura presentation from the professors from Sheffield, maybe you want to put them in a real editing system, do some graphics behind, you know, some lower thirds, blend in graphics elements with name and stuff like this. So, if you really want to have a workflow that supports detailed, granular, fine detailed editing, you want to have your raw materials in the cloud, and this is what we support here. Actually, first step to the cloud would be a sync and archive function, where you just say, this project, I don't archive it to my nearline, I don't archive it to my tape, to my LTO tape, I archive it to a cloud drive. Regular S3 bucket, you just connect it, and then it's an additional archive. You can have a full project or a full media space sent to that archive. It's very open, so whatever you want to get rid of from your primary storage, just send it to the cloud, let it stay there. Compared to what you have to pay for, you know, the security guys, they tell you need 3 copies in 2 different technologies, 1 in another location. To really generate this with a regular data center, it's almost impossible. It costs you a fortune. It's very expensive. If you send it to AWS or to another cloud bucket, they do it for you. They have 3 data centers. They take the 3 different copies. They do 1 copy outside of the primary data center. You have full security. It's a little bit of cost, but if you compare it to what you have to pay for a full-blown archive solution, not only to buy it, but also to maintain it, it's not expensive. So next step would be remote proxy editing. You can have your projects in the cloud and just connect with a remote editor to that cloud installation, so that you are working almost as if your facility was here in Prague and you are working from home. That's a part installation of Editshare in the cloud. And then behind it, we have an end-to-end cloud production. As I said, our whole system is completely capable to run on AWS, which means at AWS, you rent your workstations for editing, you rent your block storage for your high bandwidth requirements, you rent an S3 bucket to keep your long time preservation data stored, and then you just install an Editshare installation on top, like you would on regular hardware, and all of a sudden you can work from every location on the planet and be fully connected to your production environment and to your data. So cloud sync drives, actually pretty much most of the S3 drives are supported to externalize your data. Yeah, this is the typical workflow that I just described. You have your assets sitting in the cloud. Your local NLEs are on-premise in your facility. You're doing a real edit, sending the material back, and then the final finish render for that material is done in the cloud by an Editshare server. And then we have this full installation where actually even the workstation is running in the cloud, and then you are logging in with a remote desktop application, so that actually even the editing work for demanding editing works, this is sometimes a better solution, because AWS has unlimited amount of powers. You can rent as much as you want and as you can pay. So sometimes it's really better to have that workstation also running in the cloud and not transfer the data through line. And one example where we have actually done this is ATP finals in Monte Carlo, already 2019. In the meantime, this was our pilot project for this. In the meantime, we have the whole cloud strategy embedded into our product portfolio, so this is something that every customer can buy. Actually, the idea was to capture material in Monaco. then ingest and upload it to London and Ashburn in Virginia, where they actually have huge data centers to store the material. Then it's getting edited and reviewed in Los Angeles. Once the review is done and the material is released for distribution, it goes back to the review and approve command goes back to Ashburn and London, and the material is getting packaged and broadcasted. This way you can really work across the globe. You don't have to send editors to another location, very expensive hotel rents and materials to be transported. So we see this in the meantime. Major German broadcasters are producing Formula One, for instance, exactly the same way. It's a common way nowadays to go through the cloud. And everything is supported with a full service assurance package, so you can have a basic support, 9x5 support hours. This is pretty much standard support contract, next business day, includes most of the version upgrades, but not the major release upgrades. If you want the major release upgrades, you go one level up, premium 25x5. This is pretty much the recommended software service level for installation. You get full software upgrades, you get full support when you have to install. Actually, in this case, we have a big team of technicians and engineers behind us. In this case, you don't have to take care, your admins don't have to take care. You can just, if you want a new upgrade, call the Editshare support team and they will lead you through the process. Then for experts, this is more for the high availability installations that I mentioned. They are going one level up, which means they get a 24/7 around the globe, get special terms from us when it comes to client sponsorship, that's what we call it. So they get the best engineer out of our office in Boston, but it comes at price. Usually you want to go with premium, that's what I can tell. So this is pretty much it. And then I would say we can have a quick look at the application if you don't have any questions. No questions at all. Okay, so then let me... I can keep it in the hand, no problem. Yeah, little bit difficult. At least I need to activate my mouse then. Okay, so this is my regular working laptop, but I have a VMware workstation here. That's a piece of software that actually simulates for me an Editshare server. You know, you have seen this is usually a big chunk of hardware, 16 disks inside, heavy piece of equipment. I cannot carry that around with me. It's not allowed in an airplane, so that's why I have to simulate it. And this is pretty much very similar to what you would find in the cloud. So this is my Editshare server. Let me quickly log in. But generally speaking, it's not much to see. You know, you have some admin routines here that you can use to work on the RAID setup and stuff like this. Stuff that you don't want to do. You want your admins to do that if at all someone touches this. So let's assume this machine is not virtual on my laptop. It's sitting somewhere in the machinery room and I'm connected via cable. How do I get to my shared storage environment now? We have a separate client for that, and that's very important. Our file system would not work without a separate, dedicated native client that really understands our topology and gives me the full benefit out of the Editshare file system. So this client is called Editshare Connect, and as you can see in Editshare Connect, I have so-called media spaces that are already set up, and I will show you in a second how this works. And I can take one of my media spaces and just mount this under a drive letter. As you can see here, right now in my drive letters, I only have C and G. If I now go and mount this as a drive letter, all of a sudden, my Windows shows an additional drive. There it is. But I think I used the wrong, yes. This one I need to mount. I'm sorry for that. Okay, so and once it's mounted, your data is there. As you can see, a couple of different folders. For instance, I received some test footage from Dušan during the days where we tested certain codecs if they work properly. So actually, with a video editing system like Premiere, you can start working right away now. You don't need anything more. The system is ready to go. So as you can see, you just play your materials from here, and it's running nice. Test material works. But this is actually not the whole story, because we want to have a little bit more. And that's why actually we first open our Welcome to Editshare screen, where you see the different modules that I talked about. And maybe we should start with EFS control, because you have seen the EFS Connect. We are now connected with our shared file system, but once I sign in, I can do all the user management here for access to the storage. That's not yet the file, the media asset management, just the storage. So as you can see here, you can simply create new users. You can sort these users together in groups, and you can create media spaces. Every editing application is different. Adobe Premiere requires a different media structure on the file system compared to an Avid Media Composer. Avid Media Composer, they are even special because they are putting a special lock onto the folders. They call them bins, so that only Avid Media Composer can work on these folders and other editing systems can't. So this was one of the major ideas behind founding Editshare. We wanted to create a storage that supports Avid editing workstations as well as workstations from other vendors. So amongst those file systems that really support Avid workstations, we are the only ones to really support full bidirectional sync from the media asset management back to the editing system, and from the editing system back into the NLE. But basically, the idea is you create a new space. I don't do it here. You give a name. You say what kind of style you want. Is it an Avid or whatever kind of media space? And once you have your media spaces generated in Editshare Connect, you have the opportunity to get them mounted. That's what we've seen before. Now we are getting a bit slow because a couple of processes already running. Okay, so this is very much the admin console for the file system itself. It allows synchronization between different facilities. As I said before, your installation in the cloud, your installation in another city might be a second instance that you have connected to this. And if you want to sync a certain project, you know, you have your 4 or 5 editors sitting in Prague. They are completely busy with another project. All of a sudden, you get a new job in that needs to be outsourced to your second facility in Brno. I don't know, wherever. This way you can sync the whole project over to that other facility and ask the editors at the other facilities to do it there. So this is really optimized for interchangeable projects between facilities, multi-site syncing, and then a couple of configurations. And then, yeah, once your file system is set up, you can start looking into the media asset management. So usually you start with Airflow. I have one instance open here already. And this is really where you can see all your materials and make it searchable. Look down here. This is the folders that I have on my drive. I can see under raw video, we have a couple of shots from a bike race in Holland that I visited. And what you see here is pretty much the metadata. So within the metadata, actually you can put the contextual information that I talked about. So let's say we have a comment here that says this was filmed in Prague. I just put it into the metadata. I can come from somewhere completely different I search for Prague. And I find this specific clip. So this way you can make your clip searchable. And this means there is a database running behind. Actually, all the materials are registered in the database. And to get them registered into the database, you first need to check them into the media asset management system. We have prepared a little folder with material here that we actually shot during the event, for the disc event, right here. That's some stuff I got from Dušan today, and I took a couple of those. So if I now copy all this and copy it over into my shared storage system under disk test footage, I've only taken one. I'm sorry for that. Control C this. Go back here. Now it's going. So now the material is actually on the shared storage, but I will not be able to see this in the media asset management system because there is a little bit of control that needs to be done. I'm just showing this to make you aware that we are working on a database here, and before actually material is getting registered into the system, I need to make the system aware about this. The process that we are using for this is called scanning. Scanning is a job that you would usually do with a schedule, like once every 15 minutes or every half day or every hour. But I'm not going for a scheduled scan here. I just say this is the media space that I want to search for, and I run a new scan. So now in the background, my system is starting to scan, go through, and find new materials. If I want an automated workflow, I don't use the regular scanning process, but a so-called watch folder. So if I want something that gets registered automatically, I set up a watch folder, put an automation behind, and tell the system, once materials comes into this watch folder, please transcode, create a proxy file for previewing, create a high-res file for editing, and then send it to a certain folder. Maybe do a quality check in the meantime. So that would be an automated process, but we have now manually triggered the scan. But generally speaking, in Airflow, you can now see that under disk test footage, some of these clips are showing up. But actually, for instance, this was today, we cannot yet play it because in the background it's still transcoding and creating preview files so that you can more easily look at it. Just want to show you that it's really not a big issue, no rocket science to get materials checked in. You just throw it in. The scheduled scanning process starts immediately or starts when the schedule is coming, and then sometime later the material will show up. So now on the top here you can set up projects and take your materials and pull them into a project and drop them here, and all of a sudden this clip is part of that project. So within the project, for instance, you can have a sequence. I've prepared one sequence already with a little bit of material. The general process is quite easy. This is the EU Parliament materials, but the general process is quite easy. If I take the clip that I edited so far, maybe I just want exactly this scene here until he completely drops. Out point. So I take the regular in and out point, like with the normal editing systems. This is a common way to select a certain piece of footage. Go back to show my sequences. Drop this in here. You see now a subclip is getting created. The material shows up here, and in the end, we now have the baseball player. I don't want him here. That's why I can actually pull him out. There's a little trash can, and remove them from there. So let's say this is the sequence that I actually generated, and this is something that that would not be done by a video editor, but by a journalist, for instance, in the newsroom production field. So the journalist would go through, select his materials, maybe do some metadata searches, then put together a sequence. In the sequence, he would likely add some markers. Markers are set here. You can just click in somewhere here and create a new marker at that point. Call this marker speaker, for instance. And this helps you to find your materials back later when you're in an editing system like Adobe Premiere. So the typical way to go from here would be to either have the system render this as a ready-made clip, but it's pretty boring because it's only rough cuts, you know, hard cuts, no transitions, no graphics, no nothing. And this is really the point where we go into so-called craft editing with a real nonlinear editing system. We have our own craft editing solution here, as I said before. That one is called Airflow, Flow Story. So if you don't have any other editing system like Premiere, Media Composer, Final Cut, whatever, installed on your PC, you can still work with this system, load a sequence that was previously created into the editor, and start doing transitions and graphics add-ons and all that stuff right from here. I have to say it's not very common because we are very often working, or in most of the cases working with professional production teams where they have preset their choice for an editor, so they are working either Media Composer or Premiere. That's the preferred choice nowadays. This one would be good to finish a piece, but in most of the cases we want to go directly to Premiere. So I go back to Airflow. Maybe let me have a look if the materials are there that I've included sometime earlier. So as you see now, this was taken today. Also, there is one that has a preview proxy now. And now we can start putting metadata into it. So for instance, under codec I can put something in, camera serial number, commands. This would be the easiest to just put in the name of the city where it was recorded. But the whole metadata story is very open. Within Flow Control, you can pretty much set the metadata yourself. So if you want for your specific production to have a certain metadata field, you go to the configuration tab here. You can add a new field. You can say, tell me the name of the city where this was recorded. I add another metadata field, and then I add a couple of cities like Prague, Hamburg, maybe one more, Warsaw. So now I have a new metadata field generated for my media right away, and I want this to be made available. So metadata fields are actually set into so-called templates. And I have a template here that's called CPTP or technical or wildlife. So if I go into technical and say I want to edit this and just add the city metadata to this, it's in the metadata of that template, and I would see it connected with my material. You can even do so-called mappings. Sometimes with your camera, there comes a XML file with a lot of metadata. It shows you the serial number of the camera, the codec that you used, the bandwidth that was used, all the technical metadata. So what you can actually do is take one of these XML files, get it assigned here, so that every time when a file has an XML file under the same name of the media file, it looks into this XML and then takes some of the metadata and assigns them to metadata fields like camera manufacturer, camera serial number, and stuff like this. So it's very open. And let's go back to Airflow, refresh this once. Sometimes it's a little bit slow because I'm only using this virtualization. Do you come back? No, let me take it from here. So, and then if you look at the materials, for instance here, and select the metadata template with technical, then you see all of a sudden you have a metadata field here called city. You can click it and select one of the cities from a drop-down list. So adding metadata is pretty much very open. This is something that grows over time. Most of our customers starting with a basic setup and then adding templates over and over again, maybe from production to production or from team to team or from camera to camera. So you are really free to add in whatever you want. But important, once you have edited this and there is a metadata field filled and you'll search for the same name. Oh, it's not found. Likely I've written something wrong there. So this time it doesn't work. So basically that's the whole idea of metadata. And then let's go back to our sequence that I just created. Actually, to use a sequence like this and then edit it into Premiere is quite an easy task. Usually you would go to another editing room. What you've seen so far is for the journalist, and now we are going along the aisle and see the video editor in his specialized room. So he would likely open his Premiere application then. Oh, I'm very sorry I didn't open it before, because the latest Adobe applications are known to be a little bit slow when launching. But I show you right away. We open a new project or we create a completely new one. Let's say it's unknown 1, 2, 3. We create this. This is the moment where usually it takes a second. Once it's done, we use what we call an embedded panel. This is a very common technology to work with third-party applications. In Premiere, they have an API to allow you to extend the application to your own requirements or to what your application actually is looking for. These panels can be opened as command windows within Premiere. So if you go to Window, Expansions, you'll find an expansion called Editshare. And within this expansion, you can actually select a window that now gives you a window into your media asset management system. You now don't have to go through Airflow or through the Editshare applications. You can search through the media asset management application yourself using the Adobe Premiere panel. We also have a panel for DaVinci Resolve, for instance. It works a little bit different with Avid because they don't support panels, but we pretty much have an individually developed way to integrate with every editing system. So right here, you open your project folder. Maybe you go to projects. This is the project that we have been working on. Then you go down here. The sequence that we just created is right here. I select this and say import. And what is now happening is actually that the panel looks back into the Editshare database. It sees where all the raw materials are coming from. It puts together a list of raw materials. You can see it right here. These are the materials that are part of the sequence that I generated. Then I import it. You see it's putting these materials now into the raw footage folder of Premiere and putting the sequence right away onto my timeline. And this is actually where I find back my markers. Let me see, we added one right here that was called speaker. This is the one, and voila, we have exactly the same picture that we marked before. But now we have it in Premiere, and we can do things like, let me say, standard transition here. Don't want to go to detail because I'm not a video editor. But I've just added a few transitions here, and now if you play it, you can see it's fading the materials over. So standard transitions, you can add text, whatever. And then once your scene is finished, you can either export it directly to be delivered to your customer, whatever is the target for this, or very often it's required to get these scenes back into Editshare, because once you have a sequence and it's generated in the same system, you also want to see the finished product with all graphics layers and title inlets and everything. So typically you would go upload it back into Premiere, into Editshare. You can say share to flow project. You can ask it to, I call this with a funky name. You can upload this, and the scene will get rendered by Premiere, will then be uploaded to Elements and to the Editshare storage, and you can review it right from there, package the project, and pretty much send it to archive and free your primary storage again. And this is pretty much the way we are working with most of our customers, and in the educational field, as I said, most of the customers that are doing edu for design studies or whatever are using it heavily. Yeah, quite a comprehensive workflow, I would say. Are there any questions about it?
When you push it off to your LTOs, when you move it to cold storage,
Yes.
can you package the entire project and all the metadata with that?
Yes, most of the times the system is used based on media spaces. So one project would very often be used as one media space, because on a media space you can do quota for the capacity that is used and stuff like this. So typically people would use one media space, put a project on, and then archive the whole media space. But you can also do this on a project level. If you have many projects on one media space, it's also possible to do it from there.
And given that you've got an entirely cloud offering, do you offer like pay-as-you-go, so you can just pay for when you're actually using the system?
The requests that we are getting for cloud productions are mostly production peaks or remote productions where they need it for a certain amount of time. So we package this in 3 months packages. Actually, customer can book 3-month license for the cloud. It's not pay per use, but the 3-month package is at a reasonable price. You need to consider the pricing of AWS because you need elastic block storage, you need S3, you need the workstation instance. So it's recommended to book the AWS resources based on pay-as-you-go, because you don't want to have a workstation 3 months being connected in AWS and pay for the whole time when you can have it to be like calculated based on effective uptime. So on AWS we would go that route. We are given our license for 3 months packages. Good.
Já bych možná ještě doplnil jednu funkci, kterou pokřesne, a to je markers and approval. Setkal jsem se s tím opět na multimediální fakultě, kde potřebovali pro zpracování přednášky to tomu prezentujícímu nějak ukázat, sdělit a říct, je to OK, je tam potřeba ještě něco doplnit. Opět mailem to poslat nejde, upload na YouTube, už je to prostě veřejný, i když je to neveřejný, tak prostě už je to na tom YouTube. Poslat mu to nějakým úložto a podobně, no, jsou takové obskurní systémy. Bez toho, aby si někdo něco stahoval, jednoduše přihlásí se do webového, přes webový prohlížeč na svůj účet, pustí si video, podívá se na approval a a může rovnou psát, co se mu líbí, co se mu nelíbí. Dotyčný editor opět buď v tomhletom prostředí toho Editshareu nebo v prostředí Premiéry jakéhokoliv jiného systému si to naimportuje a vidí, co mu bylo schváleno, co mu nebylo schváleno, co má opravit, různé poznámky. To je ten způsob té týmové spolupráce, nebo jak se tomu tady říká, kolaborace, ale pro nás ta kolaborace má trošku jiný význam.
Tak já bych ještě Dušana jenom doplnil, že my právě u nás přímo na firmě máme nainstalovaný jeden ten Editshare server, který je používaný vyloženě pro testovací účely. Tak kdybyste třeba měli zájem to principiálně vyzkoušet, jak to řešení vlastně funguje, jak se tam ty média nahrávají, jak se v nich vyhledává, jak se pak třeba z nich sestaví ten jednoduchý projekt, nebo jak to připravíte pro toho editora, můžete se s náma klidně domluvit, my vám můžeme dát přístup přímo na ten náš vlastně testovací server, uděláme vám tam účet, uděláme vám tam jako nějaký media space, to znamená, dáme vám třeba nevím, 100 giga jako na disku, abyste si tam mohli vlastně nahrát svůj materiál a podívat se na ten princip, jak vlastně ten systém funguje, jak se v něm pracuje, jak se v něm vyhledává, jak se vlastně v něm sdílí potom vlastně vzájemně ty projekty v té různé části rozpracovanosti a tohleto celé teda je možný, protože jsme právě zakoupili ten stroj hlavně z toho důvodu, abychom to sami mohli testovat a učit se, jak vlastně se dá pracovat tady s tímhletím systémem a s tou kolaborací, ale zároveň, že to máme na rychlém připojení, máme to vlastně připojení na 600 megabitů up-down ve veřejným IP, tak vlastně jsme schopní zájemcům poskytnout přístup a ti si potom jako můžou prostě s tím pohrát. Eventuálně můžeme udělat klidně třeba i dálkové školení, jo, a potom můžete pracovat přímo fyzicky na tom našem testovacím serveru. Tak máte ještě někdo nějakou otázku tady na přítomného kolegu z Editshareu? Vidím, že ne, tak já bych vám všem chtěl poděkovat za účast na dnešní konferenci, kterou jsme udělali se zaměřením na vysoké školy a to videoprodukci. Děkuji moc a těším se třeba za rok na podobné konferenci. Nashledanou.